Well, guys, it's been almost 24 hours since the Indianapolis Colts imploded against the Denver Broncos, and the sentiment remains the same. Taylor's fumble, Steichen's play call, Richardson's play, plain and simple, changes need to be made. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Drake Wally. Drake, not good. And I think the biggest thing about this Colts loss is I think most people were expecting a Colts loss. Maybe not Colts fans, but they were 4-point underdogs according to Vegas. I thought that the Colts were going to lose by 4. I didn't expect to see what I saw yesterday. And I think we're having a much different conversation today if the Colts did play well and just got beat by a better team and still lost by 4. But the way in which they lost, I said before the game that they weren't going to get blown out of the building. They certainly did. But the way that they had this game in their hands pretty much and then just wasted it away. I mean, it's obviously Colts Nation has been in an uproar over the past 24 hours, but it really calls into question not only what the Colts, if they have on this team, is ever going to be good enough, but really the entire organization as a whole, if they need to tear this thing down and start back from square one.
I mean, just listen to how our episode has changed just in a matter of a couple of days. We're talking about how pivotal this game is if they win it, and even if they don't win and they compete and stay really close, you're still talking about some positive things. Now we're talking about, was this the game that showed Jim Irsay that his team might need to be taken apart and retooled completely? That is crazy. I mean, it's a conversation that might need to be had at some point, though. But yes, I think that, honing back into the game here, boy, it showed that there are so many kinks in this armor. It showed that certain areas of the football are nowhere near as secured as you might have thought before. The defense looked really good. The offense looked like crap. I mean, there's a lot we have to dive into, but at some point we are going to have to address, what kind of changes might need to be made, because I think that you're going to see something happen.
Yeah, and I think just again, we're talking about another game where the Colts couldn't put the entire thing together. Complementary football was not a thing, and the way in which they blew that lead, giving up 24 unanswered points, and we're not even really going to talk much about the defense today because the defense did enough to win yesterday. I don't care what the score says. The defense did enough to win yesterday, more than enough. This falls on the Colts offense, falls on Shane Steichen, falls on Jonathan Taylor, falls on Anthony Richardson, falls on everybody on that offense, the offensive line, the wide receivers, tight ends, everybody. It was an embarrassment to see what the Indianapolis Colts put on the field yesterday. And I think it goes to show, again, and we'll dive into this all throughout the episode tonight, guys, but this thing runs deeper than just the mistakes on the field. I wrote about it on Horseshoe Huddle. If you want to read through almost 1,600 words of mine, I went into deep detail on it, but this goes to the culture of the Indianapolis Colts. And the only way that it's going to change is if the people in power actually make those changes. Otherwise, you need new people in power so that those changes can be made. But guys, we're going to dive into all this because we have a lot to talk about, not just about the game, but what this means for the future of the Indianapolis Colts. And we already have people in the chat. We're going to start out with the $5 super chat from the man himself, Truett. Thank you so much for all of your support, Truett. Really do appreciate it. And Truett asked, didn't a player do what JT did last year? No touchdown and a touchback to the opponent. It was actually done yesterday. Truett in the Bengals game, as Marvin Fox said, happened twice yesterday with the Cincinnati Bengals. So yes, it's happened before. Certainly it's happened many a times, and the answer is still the same. It's an inexplicable. It's a mistake that just cannot be made, especially from one of your captains, from one of the best players on your team. But True, thank you so much for all of your support. We really do appreciate it. Lindsey Mack says, where to begin? Felt like everyone's mentality on the offense side of the ball disintegrated after the JT drop touchdown, including Steichen, just completely fell apart. Yeah, definitely. And I think we're going to dive into all of that, but that was definitely, Drake, I think you and I agreed last night when we did the post-game reaction on Bleacher Report that was the turning point in this game, was that that drop touchdown by Jonathan Taylor. Yim, really upset with the inexcusable mistakes that ultimately ended up in a loss yesterday, but at the same time, trying to remember playoffs wasn't necessarily what this year was about. And I think that's a good way to look about it, Yim. I think a lot of people are seeing how the Colts lost yesterday as more of an indictment rather than them just missing the playoffs. But I think that's a good way to look at it. True. And of course, we've got the third host of this show, Stats Matt. What's up? End of year preseason and draft season is upon us. Definitely. Sean Contwright is here as well, saying, can we fire Ballard now? We're really going to talk about that as well tonight.
Oh, yeah.
If the Colts end up firing Chris Ballard, what we think. We got Rael Wilmot. Defense had 3 big turnovers and we didn't convert. Yes, absolutely. Like I said, defense did enough to win. Just not it was just the offense that really made this thing fall apart. So guys, please be sure to go follow us on all of our socials as we're getting started here. You know where to go. Like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell, turn on those notifications, because our episode this week to preview the Titans game, it's going to be on Wednesday night this week. You have another night on dad duty Thursday. Wife's Christmas program at the school she teaches is on Thursday. I've got the little guy on Thursday. So Wednesday night is when we will preview Colts Titans. You won't want to miss it. And then wherever you listen to podcasts, please subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. We've been seeing people tell us that our podcast has shown up on their Spotify Warped over the past few weeks. Thank you all so much. That means a lot to us that we're one of your top podcast listens all year long. So keep sending those to us if we are in your top 5 podcasts. It's fun to check those out. So Drake, let's just dive right into it. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. The embarrassing 31-13 loss to the Denver Broncos. And I put this as the banner that it ends the season. And really it does. I mean, technically the Colts still have a mathematical chance to make the playoffs. But in all reality, realistically, the Colts season is done. The postseason, I think they have still a less than 10% chance to make the playoffs. So it all hinged on this game yesterday. The CBS showed the graphic multiple times that if the Colts won, their playoff chances would go to above 50%, and if not, it would drop to 9%. And lo and behold, the loss likely means that the Colts only have 3 games left, and then we're faced with more questions once the offseason gets here about where the Colts go from here.
Yeah, and you also have to ask yourself, does that even look like a team that is, if they did make the playoffs, what kind of impact would they even have? You got to look at that performance against the Broncos with so many things on the line and just how everything just fell apart. Guys who are the best offensive weapons all the way down to guys who are, backups on the offensive line and whatnot. Everybody really just had multiple miscues that were turning points, momentum killers, like 4 or 5 different points in this game. You can look at what the Colts did and just say that one play really cost you. And when you put too many of them together like that, eventually you're going to lose in the NFL. So
yeah, exactly. And here's the guys. I think you all know this, but at halftime yesterday, the Colts were up 13-7, and it looked like the Colts had this game in hand. I mean, they had the momentum. The running game was going really well with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. The defense was holding their own and forcing Bo Nix into mistakes, doing exactly what Drake and I were talking about on Thursday night, where making him try to be patient down the field. And whenever Bo Nix did try to make a play or did get a little bit aggressive, the Colts made him pay, and they made him pay multiple times yesterday. Broncos couldn't get anything going on the ground either, which was good to see. And even with Anthony Richardson struggling in the first half throwing the football, definitely not his best outing in the first half. He was inaccurate at times. The pressure was really starting to get to him, but the Colts still had the lead. And then the defense forces a 3-and-out to start the second half. Then 2 plays later, it's Jonathan Taylor for a 41-yard touchdown. The Colts initially go up 20-7, and you're thinking, they've got this in the bag. All the momentum is on the Indianapolis Colts. Then the review happens, Drake, and we see that Jonathan Taylor, just a half yard before he crosses the plane, drops the football. What was your initial reaction to that play? And I think we've talked a lot about this already last night, but just what was your initial reaction and kind of how how you saw that play just completely changing the game for the Colts.
My initial reaction was, you see him score, and you're marveled at the 40+ yard touchdown run, and you see Jonathan Taylor, kind of like looking up at the big screen. And he's like making gestures, and I'm thinking, what is happening here? And they're starting to review this play, and I'm like, there is no way a former All-Pro running back, no way did he just do that. And after they come back from the break, I was actually watching the game with a friend, and I said, be ready, because there's a really good chance that Jonathan Taylor just put the ball on the ground right in front of the end zone, and they're going to come back from the break and have the information and say that it's not a touchdown. And lo and behold, that's what happened. And you're talking about going from 19-7, possibly 20-7, a 2-score game where you're making a rookie quarterback have to chase you, okay, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want the gunslinger to do. You go from that to 13-7, and all of a sudden, even though the score doesn't show the Colts are behind, they were behind. They were behind in that regard with the momentum, and the momentum had shifted completely. So everything changed after that, Andrew. The run the Broncos went on, the Colts didn't score again. So it's just like, it just shows that momentum is a real thing, and it's shown in tangible acts like dropping the football right in front of the end zone.
Yeah, and I said this last night. When you think of that, it's really inexcusable, and I try to keep to use different words to describe it. I don't just want to beat the same word over and over again, but that's really the perfect word for it. It's inexcusable, Drake. It's inexcusable whether you're Jonathan Taylor or you're Malachi Corley, who did it for the Jets earlier in the season, a rookie, and then I'm not sure of the name of the player who did it for the Bengals yesterday, but it was inexcusable for him too. There is no world where you can find an excuse as to why you dropped the football before the end zone. I may seem like an old man by saying this, but you know what? I think Barry Sanders had it correct. You run into the end zone and you hand the ball to the referee. Barry Sanders never dropped the football before the end zone. He made sure he had that football past the plane. Absolutely no excuse for that, and for it to come from one of your captains, one of your leaders, I think that makes it worse, because if the Jets it came from, that's the one that's prominent in my mind, is Malachi Corley, a rookie, still finding his way, still very young in the league. He drops it. It's still not excusable, but if it had to happen, it's probably going to be one of those guys. Jonathan Taylor's been in the leagues for, this is his 4th, 5th season in the NFL now. He's been a captain for this team for multiple seasons, been an All-Pro. He's done it for a long time. Hell, yesterday he actually moved into 2nd place all time in Colts history in rushing yards, behind only Edgerrin James. And instead of talking about that and talking about a 100-yard gain and a touchdown and Jonathan Taylor, helping will this team over the Denver Broncos, we're talking about Jonathan Taylor having the worst mistake of his career. Simply put, this is the worst mistake of Jonathan Taylor's career, and it completely changed the game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sure, Jonathan Taylor had 100 yards yesterday. Sure, Jonathan Taylor really helped that offense in there. What do the Colts have to show for it? A loss because of this tipping point. Now, Jonathan Taylor wasn't the only reason they lost the game, but he was a big reason why the Colts lost this game yesterday. It's inexcusable, and I think it just kind of goes to show the attention to detail, the lack of attention to detail that this entire team has, and that goes to show as well why the Colts always are typically beating up and win the games against the lesser teams, but they can't beat the better teams in the NFL. It's that focus, that culture, and that lack of attention to detail. All of that is tied into this, and you saw the results yesterday.
Yeah, and I do think that you can look at that play, and again, a 24-point run ensued off of this. And you're talking about your best offensive weapon. I know that Zaire Franklin on the Trenches podcast said, hey, Anthony Richardson's the best player. Okay, at times, but the consistent is Jonathan Taylor. That's the guy that you need to use as much as possible to be the fuel to the engine that is your offense if you're Shane Steichen and you predicate things on running the football. So, like you said, you expect a rookie to make that mistake. You expect an inexperienced guy, maybe who isn't in the moment often, to do something like that. You just do not expect a guy who's seen the end zone as much as Jonathan Taylor to drop the football and sue to celebrate and then look like a complete fool. So I'll say this. I fully anticipate Jonathan Taylor some kind of answer. He's going to have to answer back somehow, some way, preferably on the field next time.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor obviously was very upset about it after the game. He was upset when it happened, but at the same time, that was such a crucial mistake at a point in the game where the Colts really could have at least taken control at that point, and it would have been hard for the Broncos to climb back into it. Richard Horton, thank you so much for the $5 super chat, brother. Really, really appreciate it. And Horton says, just when I thought Cincy's Jordan Battle did the stupidest thing in football at the goal line, wait. To fast forward to our game, and now it's Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning it was Jordan Battle that did that. The name kept escaping me, but I think it was even crazier that it happened twice in the same day in two separate different games. So Richard, thank you so much for the super chat. We really, really do appreciate it. Now, Drake, I mean, the Colts still had the lead, but the offense really just couldn't recover. Defense was still doing their thing, and really it wasn't until the fourth quarter where things got out of hand for the Indianapolis Colts. You look at it and you're talking about the trick play is kind of where we're getting at here, because at that point the Broncos had just taken a 17-13 lead. The offense had been struggling ever since the Jonathan Taylor collapse or Jonathan Taylor drops football fiasco. And then Shane Steichen calls that trick play. Now, I don't blame Shane Steichen for wanting to get a spark going for this offense. I think, the offense certainly needed it. That's what he was trying to do. I don't fault Shane Steichen for trying to getting a spark into this offense. But what I do fault is the type of play that he called and the people that he used during that. Because, again, you're calling that play and you're using Adonai Mitchell, a guy that so far we're 14 games into the season, Drake. Adonai Mitchell has more bad plays than good plays at this point. And you're trusting a guy that in one of the most crucial points in your season really hasn't made very many plays for you. I could understand if you dial up a different trick play and you're counting on your best players on the offensive side of the ball to do that. But to have someone like A.D. Mitchell, who had to take the ball, actually find the laces on the football, which took him another second, and then just launch it across the field where Nick Bonito is waiting to intercept the backward pass and take it back for what's technically a fumble return for a touchdown. I think I'm almost at a loss for words at this point, Drake, because it's just I don't know what was going through Steichen's head at that point to want to use that player in that situation. You could call so many other plays to get going. You could use Anthony Richardson on the ground game more. The Colts really abandoned the run game with Anthony Richardson, and I'm not exactly sure why. Because that's been working. So you didn't really use him in the run game. You could have tried that another flea flicker with Jonathan Taylor if you really had confidence in him. Didn't look like they did, but I don't think, again, I don't think there's an excuse for why you're using Adonai Mitchell in that situation. I understand you rep the play all week, but at the same time, you have to be realistic with yourself. This overconfidence in certain players is biting the Colts over and over again. And sure enough, it bit him again on Sunday with a trick play that a lot of people are calling one of the stupidest plays of the entire football season.
Yeah. And again, you did rep it, right? But it's a crucial game. The situation didn't seem like it needed to have a trick play. There's probably so many, given Steichen's mentality toward writing up plays and drawing up plays, there's got to be something else in this guy's bag that he could have turned to. Like you said, like maybe a Jonathan Taylor flea flicker, which that play didn't even look that great when it was executed. So just absolutely baffling. You watch the play from a different camera angle too, and you watch Bonito. And he's just sitting there waiting. He's just waiting. And it's like, You probably didn't see him because it engulfed in a whole bunch of white jerseys and your offensive linemen are standing there. But the play was slow developing. It was like watching a slow train wreck unfold. Richardson running after Benito. You're just really disappointed in that play call. And it was, again, we use this word a lot because you have to in this game. Yet again, a microcosm of just how the entire game fell apart after Jonathan Taylor's fumble. It just seemed like these kind of gaffes, these kind of mistakes just started to weirdly pile up for the Colts. I will say, I know the Jonathan Taylor one really, really sucked and it removed a touchdown, but this had to be the worst play of the game. I mean, I think it's the worst play of the game because Taylor's was a complete mental lapse. I mean, this was awful execution from top to bottom on the play. So I think you do have to put it at the foot of Shane Steichen. So
yeah, I just think there were much better options at that point, whether the play was there or not. Because I see stats, Matt, saying still don't hate the trick play. Watch the all 22. It was there, and sure, it could have been there, but at the same time, how many times has Adonai Mitchell actually executed something this year? Executed it to how it should be, and again, I understand that there is a case to be made that it's the right play, but it just wasn't executed. But I think as a coach, it's more than just calling the right play. That's what an offensive coordinator kind of does. As a head coach, you need to if you're going to call the plays, not only call the right plays, but I think you need to use the right the correct players that in those situations as well, because not all players are going to execute equally is what I'm getting at. And I see Patrick Rye, the CFO, is already being a menace in the chat. I see NFL Nerd has called that out too. Now this one's not as bad. There's a couple of the one above it. It's a pretty menacing comment. I love you, Patrick, and thank you so much for the super chat, brother. Giving us a laugh on this somber Monday here. Best part of the game, sideline reporter says both of these quarterbacks are trying to be Manning's heir apparent, and then the camera cuts to Richardson picking his nose. Wasn't the best look for the Colts quarterback. I did see that as well, but certainly kind of it sums up what yesterday was for the Indianapolis Colts. Patrick, thank you so much for all of your support, man. Really, really do appreciate it. And then Drake, we get to Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson, you're thinking he's had 3 consecutive games in a row where he hasn't been perfect, but he certainly looked much better. Yesterday was pretty bad for Anthony Richardson. Again, the box score doesn't tell the entire story, but we'll read it off anyway. 17 for 38, 172 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, was sacked twice, had a quarterback rating of 36.3, also ran the football 7 times for 46 yards and a touchdown. But Drake, it was definitely not a very good game for Anthony Richardson. The accuracy was all over the place. A lot of that was due to pressures, because he didn't really get many times where he could stand back there in the pocket cleanly and deliver a good football. Both interceptions were really big misses. He missed some other throws as well. And I think if you turn on the tape of that game again, you'll see that the pressure was really affecting his mechanics too. His base did not look good. And a lot of times he was just trying to get the football away before the pressure could get there. And that brings us to Stats Matt stat of the day, presented by Busch Light. Anthony Richardson was 14 of 28 with 2 interceptions versus zone, giving the Broncos their best game in completion percentage over expected and passer rating allowed all season. The unit was 5th in the NFL in completion percentage of over expected and the best in passer rating coming into the game. You got to credit to Vance Joseph and this Broncos pass defense. They did a number on the Colts yesterday, Drake, both as a pass rushing unit and in the secondary, obviously with Brandon Jones getting the interception, with Patrick Surtain making a fantastic play. Anthony Richardson looked like a rookie quarterback yesterday, and he really struggled, as did Bo Nix. Both of these guys really struggled yesterday, but unfortunately Richardson's was in the losing effort.
Yeah, and you saw some really awful turnovers. Now, I know that the offensive line, mostly the right side, they kind of collapsed at times. You really had, an overwhelming performance. I can't remember his name. It's we talked about him in one of our Horseshoe Huddle halftime episodes. Humphreys, interior defensive tackle for the Broncos. Anyway, they did
was it John Franklin Myers?
Franklin Myers, not Humphreys. Yeah, John Franklin Myers absolutely tore apart the competition. He did a wonderful job getting in Richardson's face. But yes, man, I mean, you had a performance where you're dialing back from what he was doing previously. Even that Lions game, he looked on point. You just looked at the supporting cast like, what is happening in this game? In this game, yes, the offensive line could have definitely played better, but the decision-making just wasn't there. There were some really bad missed throws. I think that, along with, again, some of those other mistakes that happened, Richardson has to look at this performance like, you got to build off of it. And yes, it was a tough team, tough game to win, but you had an awful performance in a game that you had to win to keep your playoff hopes alive, in a game where Richardson needed to be at his best, and he just wasn't. But again, neither was the team. So.
No, it certainly wasn't. It doesn't help when he was pressured as much as possible, as much as he was as well. Another stat from StatsMac: Mark Lewinsky gave up 8 pressures yesterday, which is tied for the most out of any Colts interior offensive lineman has given up in a single game all season. Mark Lewinsky yesterday looked like a guy that hadn't played football all season, and only had one game in 2024. Was not good for the right guard. I don't know if Dalton Tucker would have done much better, but yeah, having Danny Pinter in there with multiple false starts, I thought that was interesting to see instead of Tanner Bortolini in there, and that all plays a role in this. But I think you can't put all of this on Anthony Richardson being pressured as to why he had a bad game. You're going to be pressured in the NFL, and the good quarterbacks overcome that. That's something Anthony Richardson is going to need to overcome. It's something that he is going to need to rep and learn in the offseason, that even while under pressure, his mechanics can't just go to the wayside. He's got to still be able to keep his mechanics. He still has to thrive under pressure. Yes, he is probably the best quarterback in the NFL at throwing defenders off of him. He did it again yesterday, where he was able to escape numerous sacks. Was only sacked twice. Probably should have been 5 or 6 times yesterday. Did a phenomenal job at that. But that's only half the battle. If you're going to do that, you got to shake it off, but then you still got to deliver catchable throws down the field and be able to extend the play and try to make something of it. Otherwise, then again, you're going to continue to have these situations where you're not going to be able to get anything if you're pressured. And it's in today's NFL, the really good quarterbacks are able to deliver under pressure. We see Josh Allen do it all the time. Patrick Mahomes. We see Lamar Jackson do it all the time. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. If you want to reach the upper echelon of the quarterbacks in the NFL, you have to be able to deliver under pressure. We saw Jordan Love do it last night for the Green Bay Packers. NBC had a graphic up of what Jordan Love was, his stats, where he was kept clean, and his stats under pressure. They were pretty much the same. So if you want to reach that Anthony Richardson has to be better under pressure. Again, long way to go. He's still young, but that's definitely something that has reared its head this season, Drake, is that when Anthony Richardson is pressured, he becomes a much worse quarterback. And for a guy that's already learning, that's already inconsistent, that's just a really bad recipe for disaster. And defenses are going to continue to key in on that and send pressure until he's able to combat that and show that it's not going to affect him any longer.
Yeah, and every quarterback is going to respond to pressure probably with less efficiency. I mean, come on, there's an obvious reason why, but it's really the ones that can continue to deliver those throws. They can at least be still halfway efficient. Now, obviously, Josh Allen is the highest end of it. He's really at the top tier. Jordan Love's at the top tier. Richardson has a long way to go. We've seen him be able to make great plays, after avoiding a sack and stuff like that. This was a game where they didn't let him, despite the fact he was avoiding sacks. But like you said, Andrew, the pressure is going to come, and now you have a blueprint. Just try to take away the ground game. This is every game for every defense facing the Colts. Take away the ground game, force Anthony Richardson to throw, and bring as much pressure as possible, because he has responded awful to it. And you have a perfect sample against the Broncos.
And the thing is too, Drake, I think, again, what has been so frustrating about this Colts team this year is they can never play complementary football. when one side plays well, the other side always plays very, very poorly. So I'll quickly run through some of the highlights from the defense because we all know that they did enough to win. Like I said, only 193 yards allowed. They forced 3 turnovers yesterday, 3 interceptions of Bo Nix, held Bo Nix to a 20 of 33 for 130 yards. He did have 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. His quarterback rating was 61.4, QBR of only 15.3. And again, they were all over the place. Zaire Franklin with an interception, Nick Cross with the interception, Samuel Womack with the interception. Those guys played really, really good football, good enough for them to win. But unfortunately, wasn't the case then. And they tried to keep this team in it. But when the offense was as putrid as they were yesterday, especially after the Jonathan Taylor dropped football at the goal line, there's no way that you're going to be able to come back for that and expect to win against a playoff team like the Denver Broncos. Patrick, thank you so much for the super chat, brother. We really, really do appreciate it. And Patrick says again, Ballard after this game, our secondary is perfect. 3 interceptions, legit no changes, no offseason competition, everyone extended. We like our guys. And so you never know. It could be the same spiel by Chris Ballard. Certainly wouldn't surprise me if you do hear that from the Indianapolis Colts GM. Patrick, thank you so much for all your support. I know you're frustrated, brother, but we really, really do appreciate it. We do have another stat from StatsMat on the Denver Broncos offense. Bo Nix was 2 of 8 over 10 yards down the field with 33 yards, 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He had a touchdown to interception ratio of 9-1 entering the game. And then the fourth stat, no Broncos player had over 33 yards receiving. So again, the Colts defense did their job, Drake. They really, really did. And it's just it's a shame that this defensive effort was wasted by an offense that just couldn't do anything yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 3 interceptions, okay? But then you're also talking about on 27 rushing attempts, they held the Broncos to 2.7 yards per carry. I mean, it was all right there. The Colts defense came to play, and I got to say, it might be Gus Bradley's best called game. I know it sounds absolutely ridiculous to say, but they had 3 picks. They were making things happen. They were keeping the team in the game, and multiple times this year. Yet again, we have to say the defense played well enough for the team to win. Just couldn't get it done against a better opponent. So
yeah, and I think again, it's just with everything that's going on, not complimentary football, the lack of attention to detail. Drake, changes need to be made one way or another. And that brings us to our super chat from David Cromwell. Thank you so much, David, for all of your support. We really, really do appreciate it. And David asked the question that Colts fans have been talking about probably since before the clock struck 0 on that game yesterday, Drake. Is it time for Chris Ballard to go? And we talked about this last night on Bleacher Report, and I think that obviously the majority of fans, or the loud fans on the internet, are clamoring for Chris Ballard to go. I do think that should Chris Ballard go and will Chris Ballard go could potentially be 2 different answers. But for those that didn't hear your take on it last night, Drake, do you think that it is time for Chris Ballard to be fired for his tenure to end as the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts? And I know you wrote a piece on this for the site today, so let's hear it.
It's difficult to say because him and Steichen and Richardson, they are in ways all tied together. So there is the chance that if you get rid of Ballard, you have to tear apart. You have to get rid of Steichen and Richardson. There is that chance. But I do think if you have to pick one of those 3, it's got to be Ballard, right? Because Richardson is putting the product on the field. Steichen's planning the product that's getting put on the field. And it's probably going to be way harder if you still believe in Richardson to take a different coach after what he's already done with Steichen, redo that, and then try to redevelop him. You got to keep Steichen and Richardson intact. So I do think it's time for Ballard to go. I can't believe I'm saying that because we have on this channel done everything possible, right, Andrew, to be supportive of the general manager, and as analysts not be, emotionally involved with it. But you just look at this game and it just kind of everything hits you. You're like, the biggest playmakers are like 30 years old. One of them is a defensive tackle. The other is an offensive guard. maybe not playmakers, but just best players. Your running back is not getting any younger. Multiple players on the offensive line aren't getting any younger. Okay. Kenny Moore's not getting any younger. And then you have some of your biggest pieces. Don't get me wrong. Jalen Jones has played, by all regards, good football, but you got a 7th rounder and then a waiver wire pickup that are your best. Those are your defensive backs. And again, not downing either one of those guys, especially Womack. He had a pick. But I just think that Chris Ballard, I think that you've seen what he's going to do. I think that you know what he's going to do. I think that it's just, if you have to get rid of one of these guys, it just has to be Ballard.
Yeah, and I think the whether Ballard should go, whether he will go, are two completely different answers. If I had to put money on it right now, I would say that Chris Ballard probably is not gone. I would assume that Chris Ballard is still the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts in 2025. And here's why. Because Jim Irsay still has faith in Chris Ballard, whether that's right or wrong. Right now, Jim Irsay still has faith that Chris Ballard is the man for this job. Again, another thing that you can kind of speak to is you mentioned it, Drake, that really I know everyone talks about the 8 years and he hasn't done anything in 8 years, but you can't look at those 8 years anymore. You really can't, because once Frank Reich was fired and the Colts decided to keep Chris Ballard instead of starting fresh, the timeline reset in that regard, where Chris Ballard got a fresh start. He got the contract extension. Shane Steichen got that 6-year deal, and Jim Irsay was going to stick with this group through the rough patches. So, and I really do think that Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson are both tied to Chris Ballard. That doesn't mean that after next year that this thing doesn't completely blow up and Jim Irsay hits the reset button, but really what the realistic thing that's going to happen is that if the Colts did fire Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson probably aren't that far away of getting out the door either, unless they make a complete wild turnaround, because you're seeing Shane Steichen would likely be a lame duck coach next year. Anthony Richardson, unless he would develop immensely in year 3, the Colts are probably looking a different direction as well. And then whichever GM you do bring in to replace Chris Ballard, he doesn't have a tie to Shane Steichen or Anthony Richardson. So if things don't reach a certain level, that GM could very well just want to clean house, start over, get his coach, his quarterback, and then you might as well hit the reset button and start all over. The only way that would work is if you are looking at GM candidates and saying, you have to, when you come in, you are going to be tied to these two, or the only candidates we're going to look at are those that are interested and willing to work with these guys and these be their guys. That's going to drastically limit the pool of candidates that you're going to be able to get. And you're probably not going to get the best candidate if you do that as well. Now, however, like I said, that's what's probably going to happen. What I would do if I was Jim Irsay, I would probably fire Chris Ballard. I think it's time. It's time, because it has been. It's not that it has been long enough. I don't really look at the 8 years. I do look at the timeline as being reset, but at the same time, I don't see Chris Ballard changing his philosophy or changing the way that he is going to build this team that's going to get the Colts over the hump. And I'm not talking about going buck wild in free agency, Drake. I'm not talking about trading the farm to go up and just get a couple of guys and instead of trading back. I'm talking about the Chris Ballard that has too much confidence in the group that he has. I think that's been one of the biggest downfalls of Chris Ballard over the years. Not the free agency, not the missed draft picks or whatever, which he's better in the draft than he's in free agency, but way too often. It seems like every single year the Colts go into the season with a glaring hole, and everyone sees it but Chris Ballard, and it ends up biting the Colts in the ass. Not only that, you see these areas where you think, okay, the Colts could very easily upgrade, or there's guys out there that could upgrade the Colts. And Chris Ballard has way too much faith in his guys to expect them to be good. And again, it just doesn't work out. That's the thing. You have too much in your faith. You're not being realistic with yourself. So if I was Jim Irsay, yes, I would fire Chris Ballard. I wouldn't pull the plug on Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson. You give those guys, in my opinion, at least one more year to figure it out. You would look for a general manager that aligns with those guys, and if they and make sure that someone that would work well and want those guys to succeed. But again, if that doesn't work, then you kind of just start over. So that's kind of where I would be in this whole thing. I do think that it is time to move on from Chris Ballard, because again, I just don't see or have faith that Chris Ballard is going to make the necessary changes in his philosophy and how he builds a team that is going to get this Colts team much better than they are right now, which is a middling team that is mediocre, loses to the good teams, beats the big teams, and not only that, but I don't see Chris Ballard making the necessary changes to change the culture in this building that is causing these issues to happen year after year after year. And it's not a good recipe for success. Drake, what is happening now inside that building, we're seeing it over and over again. We saw it in 2021 with the Wentz thing. We saw it in 2022 with the collapse, 2023 with the injuries, almost get there, and then sure enough, you lose because the quarterback doesn't throw a good pass and the running back drops it. This year, complete roller coaster where you run it back with the same guys, and those guys don't get much better. You don't really see the results in that. So it goes back to a culture thing, lack of attention to detail, where these guys aren't doing the things that they need to off the field in order so that way they can win on the field. And Chris Ballard isn't being honest with himself and actually going out there to put the best foot forward for this team and this franchise.
Yeah, you just have to see the culmination, kind of like you said, of everything that's happened in his tenure. But I'm looking more at these last couple of seasons. I love that you brought up that there's a glaring hole, glaring weakness, because you had multiple opportunities to get playmakers this year even. Okay, now I thought this was the best I've ever – now, don't get me wrong. Nick Cross has looked great. He's looked absolutely fantastic. He's been one of the silver linings of the season. Julian Blackmon has been kind of subpar, kind of like, okay, pretty good at times. You could have gotten a game-changing safety. You could have gotten multiple players, and you have enough cap that I think the Colts are in the top half of the league still with cap space. So there's been some positives from Ballard, but I think that you're just looking at a team that every season that he has been the GM, you just kind of feel like they're not hitting the expectations, not hitting the potential that they should. And you do have to start looking at the construction of the roster, which, by the way, people, is heavily reliant upon draft pick success. Okay, and I think it was actually our own Zach Hicks that said something about this on X. His high draft picks have not really panned out the best so far. Like Juju Brents, Anthony Richardson, you have to say it. He's had some really rocky performances overall. So I think that, you saying that you would fire Chris Ballard, I think that that's a sentiment that a lot of people could get behind, and who knows, it might happen. So,
yeah, and again, I think it's very unlikely that it does happen, and it probably is the best scenario. In order to, if you're going to fire the GM, it's most likely that if Chris Ballard is gone, Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson are too. Again, it would be tough for me to do that just because personally I want to see Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson get at least one more year to try to figure this thing out. And then if it doesn't happen, then pull the plug. So again, probably the best thing would be for Chris Ballard to stay on especially if you want Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson to get one more year. If you don't, then I could completely understand why you'd want Chris Ballard fired, why you want to blow the whole thing up and start over. In my opinion, I would see what you could do if you do fire to get Chris Ballard out, bring someone in, see if this and really put it forth that they would need to align with these guys. But if it doesn't happen, that GM does have the authority to kind of pull the plug and start fresh and go from there. We got a bevy of super chats, and I want to make sure I get to all of you guys here. So Patrick, thank you again for another super chat, brother. You're dumping your wallet out tonight, and we really, really do appreciate it. Patrick says, the more I watch AR, the more I think he's just bigger Tim Tebow. Major flashes of
Oh,
talent, can lead a comeback now and again, but ultimately won't be a successful starting quarterback. It will come back as a tight end. I don't know about that. I don't know about that, Patrick. I think the ceiling is much higher for Anthony Richardson. Will he reach that is a different story. But I'm not going to say he's Tim Tebow quite yet, because I never saw the allure with Tim Tebow that I do see with Anthony Richardson, simply because of all the tools. Tim Tebow never had the tools. He was simply just a guy that really fit the college game well, and had a flash in the pan in the NFL. But I don't think there's anything close to Tim Tebow having the amount of talent that Anthony Richardson does.
yeah, thank you so much, Patrick, for the super chat and the support, my man. You are awesome. But yeah, I think that there's more there with Richardson. The ceiling, the promise, it's just there. You have more of an NFL quarterback, I think, with him. Hopefully, Patrick, when we look back on AR's career, we don't say, he was kind of like a bigger Tim Tebow. That would be terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Patrick, thank you for all your support, brother. You really, really does mean a lot to Drake and myself. Paul Wilson, another $5 super chat. Thank you, Paul, for all of your support. It means the world to Drake and I, as always. Paul says, I've been ready for him to go, meaning Chris Ballard. I won't make the trip next year from Florida to see a Colts game if he is there. 8 years and we fold every big game. Matt or Paul, you do have a point there. I'm not going to argue with anything you said there, especially when you're making that trip. I mean, that's why, Drake, another thing why I think fans are so angry. And I spoke to this last night on X. Some people got a little upset with me, but I wasn't talking about those fans that are upset. I was talking about more of some specific people who were saying they hate Chris Ballard. I'm like, all right, chill out. It's just a game, people. But I can understand the frustration where you're spending your hard-earned money. I certainly spend my hard-earned money. I've got season tickets to the Colts. It's not like I live in Indy. I make the 2-hour drive there and back. Listen, the Colts take more of my money than I get for covering this team. Let's just say that. So, and it's understandable why fans are upset, because they're seeing the same thing over and over again with no changes, and they're being told to trust the process and trust things and trust that they're going in the right direction, and they're not seeing the results on the field. So it's understandable the fans are going to be frustrated, like Paul here.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you just want to see your team at least, have competitive moments and not, fall apart in games like yesterday where you let up 24 straight points after dropping the football in front of the end zone. So I think that, yes, I think that fans have every right to be upset over Chris Ballard's really construction of the team, because again, you're relying so much on draft picks that haven't panned out 100% yet. So.
Exactly. Paul, thank you so much for your super chat. We really appreciate it. Yim with his super chat. Thank you for your support. And Yim kind of echoing what I said. Ballard renewed his tenure last year. And I think that's really how this is all being viewed, Drake. And I know fans are again talking about the 8 years. He's going into year 9 and still nothing. But again, I just don't see the Colts. I don't see Jim Irsay viewing it that way. I really don't. I think that he views this as a new tenure when he hired Steichen and drafted Anthony Richardson. Now, again, if after next year the Colts remain the same or get worse, you don't see any improvement on Anthony Richardson, then it's time to pull the plug on all three. You reset. You probably get rid of most, if not all, of your top guys, and you keep your young guys on budding contracts like the Josh Downs, the Leatu Latus, those guys that you see and have a lot of faith in. But everyone else, it's probably time to hit the reset button.
Yeah, I mean, one guy that sticks out, Juju Brents. He's got a big question mark. Some of the other picks that Ballard has had, they've not been able to pan out due to injury. Like a guy like Daniel Scott. But I do have to say that Josh Downs, like you mentioned, Josh Downs, Leatu Latu, Jalen Carley's a fantastic cover linebacker. Jalen Jones has looked good. Guys like that, you have to ask yourself, like, okay, we got to keep these guys, but it's really the more prominent draft picks, like Juju Brents, where you're asking yourself, is he going to be able to stay healthy enough for a long-term, solution? Another guy is Jelani Woods. So we've got some tough decisions, I think, for the Colts to make, not just on a front office level, but for some of these rookies, or not rookies, but guys that not long ago were rookies where their contract is coming up.
Yeah, exactly. Yim, thank you so much for your support. We really do appreciate it. Final super chat on the docket, Dalton James. Dalton, thank you for all of your support with a big $10 super chat. And Dalton has a really good question here. The team absolutely crumbled after the Jonathan Taylor drop. Could you guys speak on the possible negative psyche of these players after seeing so many acts from this circus? That's a really good question. And Drake, I want to see what you have to say first, because well, we obviously saw how whether it was said that the Colts were fired up and ready to get after the Jonathan Taylor drop. We saw it was out there on the field. We saw the faces on the sidelines. They were crushed. Their wind had been knocked out of them, and they could never really get it back, especially the offensive side of the ball. Not so much on the defense. The defense, like I said, did their thing, but that offense was never the same after the Jonathan Taylor drop. So what do you think over these next 3 weeks? Do you think we're going to see this have a negative effect, or does that carry over into this week against the Titans or the Giants or the Jaguars further on? Or do you think that this isn't necessarily going to linger and the Colts are going to be able to still come out next week and play their game?
You want to say this is going to be a fired up team that's pride has been hurt. They've had their butts kicked on at Mile High, and their playoff hopes are gone. So they're going to come fired up in these last 2 games. But I want to take people back to Kenny Moore's comments about people not giving enough effort earlier. Okay, clearly this is not a team that's just going to go, you know what, guys, let's get fired the hell up and go out there and play football. This is something that could have with this team and the locker room situation that might be not as good as, or actually maybe as bad as maybe some of us have thought. The culture issue, it's not going to be fixed overnight, man. I just don't see it happening. There's a chance that this game does have a little bit of a lasting effect on some of those guys. Because like you said, Andrew, they look like they had each just been kicked right in the gut, So you're hoping that, the former that I said is the case, where they come fired up because they need to win these last 3 games. So,
yeah. I do think that, personally, I think because most, and this might actually be part of the problem. Most of these guys have, or I would say a lot of these guys have seen the ups and downs and gone through this. There's a lot of these guys that are on this team that were on that 2021 team when it collapsed with Carson Wentz, or on that 2022 team with Matt Ryan and how terrible that team was. So I think because a lot of these guys have seen so many bad things happen over the years, I don't know if it's necessarily going to carry over. I don't think there's going to be I don't think that they're going to be thinking about this. But at the same time, Drake, maybe that's the problem, because they've just gone through so many bad times with this team that maybe that is one of the reasons that a reset is needed. Because this group just, while they're a very talented group, for whatever reason, it's never been able to click, and they've never been able to go out there and put together that winning football. So really, really intriguing question, Dalton. Really, really do appreciate it, and appreciate everybody's questions this evening, because again, I think you guys are asking really tough, good questions that the Colts need to be looking at, and they need to be answering as well, because like I said, it's changes have to be made, Drake. Cultural level, it's from the very, very top. I think changes need to be made there. Changes need to be made within the team building philosophy. Changes need to be made with the coaching staff, potentially with the personnel, certainly. And if no changes are made and they continue to stick to the same thing they've been doing, we're gonna go through the same stuff again next year. And ultimately, if that's what if that's what it takes for a complete rebuild, or for the Colts to finally get on the right track, then maybe that's what's needed, and you just kind of punt and look towards 2026. But I know that's not an answer that Colts fans want, and certainly they can make, if they don't like that, they could certainly make their voices heard with their pockets by not going to games, not supporting and buying gear and spending money on this team. But it's certainly not The Colts aren't going to get better if they don't change. And it's not just changing at one little change is going to make the difference. Top down, the organization needs to make seismic changes in this offseason if they want to have a better 2025.
Yeah, and look, I know that the playoff hopes are pretty much dashed at this point, but if the Colts finish 6-11, okay, let's just hypothetically say they drop these next 3 games, or they finish 7-10, you might see some different reactions. I think if they finish with an awful record like that, they need to finish. I think if you expect let's just hypothetically say we're expecting, which more than likely this will be what happens. They finish 8-9, 9-8. They have to at least get to 8-9 if you expect Ballard to be back. I think if they finish 6-11, 7-10, yeah, I think you're going to see some kind of change would need to happen, because you have you have to have a bottom 3 schedule as far as difficulty for these last 3 games. You just have to.
Yeah, if the Colts lose these final 3 games or even drop 2 of 3, then I think the conversation completely shifts and you are looking at a potential rebuild. So that's just saying if the Colts actually went out, which, I mean, it's not a guarantee. As we've seen, it took comebacks against the Jets and the Patriots by Anthony Richardson to win those 2 games. I mean, if the Colts fall, especially if it's the 2 division games, they fall to the Titans and they fall to the Jaguars, we're probably looking at a complete rebuild at the end of this season. So maybe Colts fans want that, maybe not. We'll kind of have to see what happens. Patrick, thank you so much again for the super chat, brother. Really, really do appreciate it. You're too kind to us, I swear. Ballard's biggest issue is that he looks at Raz and potential, no matter how high the pick is. Richardson, Pay, Woods, Mitchell, etc. The first 3 rounds should be immediate impact, not hopeful projects. Now, I mean, some of the examples there, I wouldn't say, Woods was a 3rd round pick. I'm not sure. Really, a lot of times you're not going to find immediate impact guys in the 3rd round. Those guys are kind of the 1st and 2nd round guys. At that point, the Colts were taking a quarterback, so I don't blame them for taking Richardson at that point, because the other option was Will Levis, and we've all seen how that works out. I don't blame them for taking Richardson at that point. Pay was, I thought, one of the better pass rushers in that class, no matter what. And so, yes, you look at probably Greg Rousseau's a little bit better, but Pay is still a really good starter. Woods obviously hasn't worked out. Mitchell, I mean, yes, it doesn't look good now, but he's still a rookie. So again, has he missed on some guys? Sure, but he's hit on a lot of guys as well. Yeah. Typically more guys in the draft than you usually see. But Patrick, again, thank you so much for the super chat, brother. We really, really do appreciate it. Drake, let's talk about some things. So the injury report, and give our Colts player of the game before we get out of here and let the people go watch some Monday Night Football. Obviously, the biggest news from the Colts injury report, Braden Smith. Braden Smith was placed on the reserve non-football injury list due to that personal matter that he is dealing with, which effectively ends his season. He's out at least the next 4 games, including the Broncos game. Again, not going to speculate what's going on with Braden Smith, but it seems that it's pretty serious, whatever it is. So praying for Braden Smith, wishing him well, and then hoping that he can return in 2025 ready to go to have a bounce-back season.
Yeah, I mean, he's an absolute stalwart. You've been able to get your rookie, Matt Gonsalves, some time out there on the field. But, I mean, this offensive line is better when Braden Smith's anchoring that right side. So Yeah, exactly. So, and then we got some other injuries. The one from yesterday was wide receiver Alec Pierce had that concussion. Ooh. Shane Steichen did confirm that he is in the concussion protocol. Ashton Doolin didn't return with that ankle that plagued him in the New England game before the bye. Or actually, I don't even know if he played in that New England game. I actually don't think he did. It was in the Lions game before that he injured that ankle. But Ryan Kelly and Jalen Carlisle, while they did return to practice this past week, they did not return they haven't been activated from IR, so they missed that game yesterday against the Broncos. But honestly, Drake, I would assume that Ryan Kelly and Jalen Carlisle, how they were practicing last week, I would assume that they are back this week against the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, given how, the defense played great. I can't really say that they had to have Carlisle out there, but given how, given how Danny Pinter played, I think that you're really looking forward to Ryan Kelly returning.
Yeah. Well, and you're hoping that Ryan Kelly can provide a spark to the middle of that
Something.
offensive line,
Yes.
because I mean, obviously, Danny Pinter and Mark Lewinsky did not have very good games yesterday. And then finally, Colts player of the game. I know Colts fans don't really necessarily want to think about a player of the game at this point, considering everything that happened yesterday. But I think this is the time to give the defense their flowers. So Drake, where I would assume your player of the game is on the defensive side of the ball. Who gets it for? And let's try to put up one little bright spot on this game against the Broncos.
I'm going to go ahead and give it to Zaire Franklin. I thought that interception was really crafty. He almost faked his hips to make Nix think he was going outside of the throwing lane, and then just hopped right back in and took the ball away. 9 tackles. He had 2 tackles for loss. A pass defended. Dude, Zaire struggled at times this season. Zaire came to play yesterday. So
yeah, exactly. So I know we had one from way early in the broadcast from Lindsey Mack. He said his player of the game
did he get
is
yours?
Zaire Franklin. So I wanted to make sure put that on the show here. Stats Matt, I'm giving it to Zaire. Thought he was everywhere. We have John Contright saying Franklin. We have Tim Patrick who says who cares.
Fair.
Franklin sounds good.
Sounds good.
But hey, I'm going with Zaire Franklin as well. Paul's obviously fed up, and who can blame him? But yeah, I'll go with Zaire Franklin as well. Thought he had a really good game yesterday. I thought he was everywhere. Certainly played much better in coverage than we're seeing, which is good. And again, Drake, you rattled off his stats: 9 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Had the interception yesterday. Again, defense wasn't the problem. Zaire Franklin wasn't the problem yesterday. He played a really good game, and Zaire Franklin, that defense deserved to win. Fortunately, the Colts could not do it. Tressa saying Blue is the player of the game. Love that. And then the CFO, Anthony Gould and Grant Stewart. Obviously, Grant Stewart is Patrick's player of the game. But Drake, Colts are 6-8, 3 games remaining. Obviously, the playoffs isn't exactly top of mind because it's pretty much impossible for the Colts to make the playoffs. So I think with 3 games remaining, you got to see what this team's made of. I would hope the Colts would want to play and try to see what they have with more of their younger players at this point. I'm not sure if that will happen, but I think the focus, these last 3 games needs to be the focus is what it was for the majority of the season on Anthony Richardson. You need to see him bounce back after a really poor performance. You want to see him get better in really all phases. There's not a single phase that he doesn't still need to improve on. And you want to see that the quarterback start to create some momentum and really try to get something he can continue to build off of going into this offseason for what is going to be a incredibly crucial year 3 for Anthony Richardson and this Colts franchise.
Yeah, and I think obviously these aren't really, super, super spicy games that they're going to finish with. But I think given the game that he just lost, how bad the performance was, you're going to see what you have with Anthony Richardson in these last 3 games. If he goes out there and he just dominates, looks great, strings off 3 wins, you're like, okay, kid can bounce back from adversity. That's what you're going to say. It's something. It's better than nothing, and you at least go into the offseason with some confidence. However, you go out there and you go 1-2, 0-3. Richardson sucks it up. Oh my goodness, man. You're going to be, I don't even know we don't have the time to dive into that, but I cannot imagine what would, entail from a 6-11 or 7-10 finish with bad quarterback play.
I could tell you pretty quickly, Drake, we'd be talking about a rebuild here on January 6th, where we're looking at a complete teardown of this Indianapolis Colts team. And that's our show for today, guys. Really appreciate you all coming in on a Monday, airing out your frustrations, having a really good conversation with us to talk about where this Colts team currently stands. Want to give a shout out to the many super chats we received this evening. Truitt, Richard Horton, Patrick about 500 times, David, Yim, Paul Wilson, Dalton, all of you guys, thank you so much for your super chats. Thank you to Stats Matt for his stats today, and everyone else that joined us this evening. We really do appreciate every single one of you. Again, please go follow us on all of our socials. The links are in the descriptions. You guys know where to find them after me saying it over and over again. And make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Hit that bell on the YouTube channel. Turn those notifications on, because remember, we are going to be going live on Wednesday Wednesday night this week to preview Colts Titans. So you'll want to be here. But if you can't catch us live, like I said, make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review wherever you reach your podcast. So to continue to get us up those rankings, and we can continue to reach other Colts fans just like you. And Patrick, 501. Thank you so much again for the super chat. We really, really do appreciate it. But Drake, I know you've got plenty out there on horseshoehuddle.com already about this game. Go tell the people what they need to go check out.
Yeah, lots of stuff about the Colts risers and fallers and the debilitating loss of the Broncos. And of course, it's not a piece I wanted to write, but I had no choice. And that's why the Colts must dismiss Chris Ballard.
Yeah, check those out. Really good pieces by Drake. Myself, got a really long piece out there about why the Colts blunders versus the Broncos is more indicative of the cultural problems that this franchise has currently. Really did a deep dive on each one of those and where the Colts stand from here and what changes need to be made if Indianapolis does want to rise above this and become a winning franchise once again. So make sure you check that out, as well as everything else on Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. And we'll be back Wednesday night to get you set for an AFC South showdown that probably nobody cares about, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Colts, Titans this Sunday. Are we going to see Anthony Richardson versus Will Levis? Anthony Richardson versus Mason Rudolph? And boy, if the Colts lose to the Titans, is this going to be an absolute dumpster fire next Monday? But please tune in, come join us. It's going to be fun like it always is. Thank you all so much once again from the bottom of our heart for all the support. And we'll see you right back here on Wednesday night to talk more Colts football with all of you.